I stood in my driveway that Thanksgiving morning, looking at the house I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago. The workshop out back still smelled like motor oil and sawdust. The place had good bones, solid. Unlike some things in my life. My name is Jack Brennan. I'm 54 years old, and I've spent most of my life working with my hands. Started as a mechanic, then built my own business, Brennan Auto and Equipment. Nothing fancy, just honest work, good service, and a reputation that meant something in this town. The turkey was already in the oven. I'd been up since 5, prepping everything the way my wife used to before cancer took her 6 years ago. Miles was bringing Nicole, my son, and his wife. The words still felt strange in my mouth even after 3 years of marriage. I walked back inside and checked the bird, golden brown skin starting to crisp. The kitchen was warm, smelling of sage and butter. I poured myself another coffee and looked at the dining room table, set for 3, crystal glasses my wife had loved, the good plates we saved for holidays. My phone buzzed. Miles. Running late. Be there by 2. It was already 1:30. I texted back a thumbs up and went to check on the sweet potatoes. The house felt too quiet. It always did on holidays now. I could remember when Miles was small, running through these rooms, his laughter bouncing off the walls, before law school, before Nicole, before everything changed. I heard tires on gravel at 2:15. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the front door. Miles stepped out of his black BMW, straightening his jacket. Nicole emerged from the passenger side, her heels clicking on the concrete. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Hey, Dad!" Miles offered a brief hug, the kind you give strangers. "Miles, Nicole." I nodded at her. "Jack." She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. It never did. We walked inside. Nicole's gaze swept the living room, and I could see the judgment in her expression. The worn couch, the old television, the photographs on the walls, me and Miles fishing when he was 10, his mother holding him as a baby, family pictures that documented a life she wasn't part of and clearly didn't value. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. "Make yourselves comfortable." Miles loosened his tie and sat in the armchair that used to be his mother's favorite. Nicole perched on the edge of the couch, her posture rigid, like she was afraid something might contaminate her expensive dress. "How's business, Dad?" Miles asked, pulling out his phone. "Steady. We landed a contract with Morrison Trucking last month. Fleet maintenance." "That's good." He wasn't listening. His thumbs moved across the screen. "How about you? How's the firm?" "Busy. Always busy." He glanced up. "We're working on a major merger. Can't really talk about it." Nicole spoke for the first time since entering. "Miles has been working so hard, 80-hour weeks. It's been difficult." "I bet." I kept my voice neutral. The timer went off in the kitchen. I excused myself and pulled the turkey from the oven. Perfect. I carved it in the kitchen, arranged everything on platters, and brought it all to the dining room. The sweet potatoes, green beans, stuffing, cranberry sauce, rolls. I'd made enough for an army, force of habit from years of having a full house during holidays. We sat down. I was at the head of the table, Miles to my right, Nicole to my left. I said a brief grace, more for my wife's memory than any real conviction, and we began passing dishes. The first 10 minutes were quiet, except for the scrape of silverware on china. Then Nicole spoke. "Jack, this stuffing is very traditional." "My wife's recipe." "Of course." She took a tiny portion. "I've been trying to get Miles to eat healthier. All these carbs and butter, it's not good for him." Miles said nothing, cutting his turkey into precise pieces. "He looks healthy to me," I said. "Well, you can't see everything from the outside." She dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "We've been seeing a nutritionist and a personal trainer. Image matters in Miles's line of work." I took a bite of sweet potato and said nothing. Nicole continued. "Actually, Jack, I wanted to talk to you about something. Miles and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time to address some issues. I set down my fork. Issues. Family dynamics. She glanced at Miles, who was staring at his plate. There have been some tensions. Things that need to be resolved. What things? She straightened in her chair. Well, for one, your attitude toward me. I've tried to be welcoming, to include you in our lives, but you've been cold, distant. Frankly, it's been hurtful. I looked at Miles. He was still focused on his plate, jaw tight. I'm cold? I kept my voice level. Yes, you barely call. When we visit, you're polite but clearly don't want us here. And you've never once asked about my family, my background, my interests. Her voice took on a wounded tone. I'm part of this family now, Jack. I'm your daughter-in-law. I deserve respect. I picked up my water glass and took a long drink. The ice clinked against the sides. You want respect? Yes. Is that too much to ask? I set the glass down carefully. Nicole, I've been nothing but polite to you since the day Miles brought you home. I welcomed you into this family. I paid for a third of your wedding when Miles asked. I've kept my opinions to myself even when what? Her eyes flashed. Even when you disapprove of me? Even when you think I'm not good enough for your son? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. Miles finally spoke. Dad, maybe we should talk about this later. No. Nicole's voice was sharp. We're talking about it now. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around him. I'm tired of feeling judged. I leaned back in my chair. You feel judged? Yes. And you want an apology? I think that would be appropriate, yes. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. The boy who used to help me in the workshop, who learned to change oil before he learned to drive, who once told me he wanted to be just like his old man when he grew up. That boy was gone. In his place sat a stranger in an expensive suit, letting his wife pick a fight with his father at the Thanksgiving table. Miles, I said quietly, do you have something you want to say? He met my eyes for the first time since sitting down. Dad, Nicole's right. You have been distant, and I think you should apologize. The words hung in the air like smoke. Apologize. Yes, to Nicole, for making her feel unwelcome. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just a clarity I hadn't felt in years. And if I don't? Nicole leaned forward. Then maybe it's best if we leave. If you can't treat me with basic respect, then I don't think we should be here. Miles nodded slowly. She's my wife, Dad. If you can't accept her, then we have a problem. I looked at the table, the turkey I'd spent hours preparing, the dishes I'd carefully made from recipes my wife had taught me, the house I'd opened to them, the life I'd built and maintained while they lived in their expensive condo downtown, surrounded by things I'd helped pay for. Something shifted inside me, a gear clicking into place. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Both of them looked up at me, surprise on their faces. You want me to apologize? I said, my voice calm and steady. You want me to beg forgiveness for not kissing your ass enough, Nicole? For not pretending that you're anything other than what you are? Dad, Miles started. I held up a hand. No. You had your say. Now I'll have mine. Nicole's face had gone pale, 2 spots of red high on her cheeks. I know about the money, Miles. The transfers from my business account. $50,000 over the past 18 months. Small amounts at a time. 500 here, 1,000 there. Not enough to notice right away, but enough to add up. The color drained from Miles's face. I know about the meetings with Preston Burke at Burke Development, the plans to leverage my property for a commercial real estate deal, the paperwork you had drawn up to force a sale. Nicole's hand trembled as she set down her fork. I know about the power of attorney documents you forged with my signature last year, the ones that would give you control of my assets if I became incapacitated. Convenient, those. Especially with the clause about cognitive decline that can be triggered by two doctors you selected. Miles opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I know you've been telling people in town that I'm losing it, that my memory is going, that I'm making bad business decisions, setting the groundwork for a competency hearing. I walked to the sideboard and picked up a manila envelope I'd placed there that morning. And I know about the affair, Nicole, with Burke's business partner, David Chan. The photographs are very clear. Hotel receipts, text messages, emails discussing how you'll split the assets once you and Miles divorce after securing my business. I dropped the envelope on the table. It landed with a soft thud. So no, I said, my voice like iron. I will not apologize. Not to you, Nicole. And not to you, Miles. Not for seeing exactly what you are. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Nicole recovered first. This is insane. Jack, I think you're having some kind of episode. Shut up. The words came out flat and hard. I'm done listening to you. Miles found his voice. Dad, whatever you think you know. I don't think, Miles. I know. I have bank records. I have copies of documents. I have sworn statements from the notary you bribed to witness those forged signatures. I have photographs, videos, and a paper trail that would make any prosecutor very happy. I walked to the door and opened it. Cold November air rushed in. Get out of my house! Nicole stood, her face twisted with rage. You're going to regret this. No, I said. You are. Miles stood slowly, his face ashen. Dad, please, we can talk about this. We're done talking. I want you both out. Now. They moved toward the door. Nicole grabbed her purse, her heels clicking frantically. Miles paused in the doorway. Dad, Get out. He flinched and walked past me. I watched them get into the BMW. The engine started. They pulled away, gravel crunching under the tires. I closed the door and stood in my living room. The house was silent again. The turkey sat on the table, steam still rising from the carved meat. The crystal glasses caught the afternoon light. I walked to my phone and made a call. Henry, it's Jack. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's move forward with everything we discussed. I hung up and looked out the window at the workshop, the place where I'd built my business from nothing, where I'd taught my son to work with his hands, to value honest labor. That boy was gone. But I wasn't. I had work to do. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. I sat in my workshop until dawn, going through files, documents, photographs. Everything I'd gathered over the past 6 months since I'd first noticed the irregularities in my business accounts. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The space smelled like engine grease and metal shavings. My tools hung on pegboards, organized by size and function. Everything in its place, everything orderly, the way I liked it. My computer screen glowed in the darkness. Bank statements, transaction records, emails I'd retrieved from Miles's old laptop, the one he'd left here 2 years ago, thinking I'd just throw it away. I hadn't. I'd kept it in a drawer, never imagining I'd need it. I'd been stupid, blind. I'd made excuses for the distance between us, blamed it on his career, on the pressures of his new life. I'd told myself that sons grow up, move away, build their own families, natural progression. But this wasn't natural. This was calculated, deliberate, predatory. The first transfer had happened 19 months ago, $750, coded as a business reimbursement, legitimate looking, then another 3 weeks later, $500 this time, then $800. Always irregular amounts, always spaced out, always with plausible explanations. I'd noticed something was off about 4 months after it started. Nothing I could put my finger on, just a feeling that the numbers didn't quite add up the way they should. But I was busy. Morrison Trucking had come through with that contract, and I was hiring 2 new mechanics, expanding the shop. I'd pushed the feeling aside. Big mistake. 3 months ago, my accountant Gail had mentioned some discrepancies. Nothing major, she said, but the petty cash seemed off by a few thousand. Could I check my records? I'd checked. That's when I saw the pattern. I called in some favors. My neighbor, Frank Russo, had retired from the state police 5 years ago. Before that, he'd worked white-collar crime. We'd been friends for 20 years, ever since he'd bought his house 2 doors down. I'd invited him over for a beer, told him I had a problem. He'd listened, then nodded slowly. You want me to look into it? If you've got time. He'd had time. Frank was bored in retirement, his wife constantly on him about projects around the house. He'd taken to the investigation like a man who'd found his purpose again. Miles and Nicole had been planning this for over 2 years, since before they'd gotten married. The wedding itself had been partially funded with money they'd already stolen from me. They just hadn't taken it directly. They'd used my business credit cards, charged expenses to my accounts, moved money through shell corporations. Frank had traced it all. The web of small companies, the offshore accounts, the intricate paper trail designed to hide the theft until they could execute their endgame. And the endgame was simple. Take everything. Preston Burke was the key. He owned Burke Development, the largest commercial real estate firm in 3 counties. He'd been buying up property along Route 42 for the past 5 years, building strip malls, office complexes, chain restaurants. My property sat right in the middle of his development corridor. 10 acres of prime real estate, currently housing my shop, my home, and a lot of empty land I'd never developed. Burke wanted it. Miles and Nicole were going to give it to him. The plan was elegant, I had to admit. First, establish that I was mentally incompetent. Miles, as my only child and next of kin, would petition for conservatorship. The forged power of attorney documents would support his claim. The doctors would testify about my declining cognitive function. Doctors Nicole had carefully selected, doctors who'd never actually examined me, but would base their testimony on Miles's descriptions of my behavior. Once Miles had control, he'd sell the property to Burke. Market value was about $2 million. Burke would pay $3 million, $1 million above market. That extra $1 million would get split between Miles, Nicole, and Burke's partner, David Chen. Then, once the property was sold and the money secured, Nicole would divorce Miles. She'd get half the proceeds in the settlement. Miles would get the other half. Chen would facilitate everything, taking his cut for helping orchestrate the deal. And I'd be left with nothing, probably stuck in some state care facility, legally incompetent and unable to fight back. Perfect plan. Except for one problem. I'd found out. Frank had given me a thumb drive 3 weeks ago. Everything was on it. Bank records, emails, photographs of Nicole and Chen together, recordings of phone conversations between Miles and Burke, documents showing the shell corporations, the paper trail of the theft. This is enough for criminal charges, Frank had said. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery, they'd all go to prison. I'd nodded, staring at the thumb drive. So what do you want to do? Good question. What did I want? Prison seemed too easy, too clean. They'd serve a few years, get out, rebuild their lives. They were young, they'd recover. No. I wanted something else, something permanent, something that would destroy not just their freedom, but their future, their reputation, their ability to ever recover. I wanted revenge, not the hot, impulsive kind, the cold, calculated kind, the kind that takes planning and patience, the kind that leaves no room for comeback. I spent those 3 weeks building my counterattack. Frank helped, using his connections. Gail, my accountant, got involved, her righteous anger at the theft driving her to help. Even my lawyer, Paul Mitchell, committed to the cause once he understood what was happening. We built a case, not for criminal prosecution, not yet, for civil destruction. I sat back in my chair now, looking at the files spread across my workbench. The sky outside the workshop windows was starting to lighten. Friday morning, day after Thanksgiving. Most people were sleeping off turkey comas or getting ready for Black Friday shopping. I was preparing for war. My phone rang. Frank. You okay? Yeah. How'd it go yesterday? They left, didn't take it well. I bet. He paused. They'll regroup, come at you harder. I know. You ready for that? I looked at the documents in front of me, the evidence, the ammunition. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. Good. Paul wants to meet today, 11 o'clock at his office. That work? I'll be there. I hung up and closed the files. My back ached from sitting in the metal chair all night. My eyes burned, but my mind was clear, clearer than it had been in years. I walked back to the house as the sun broke over the horizon. The morning was cold, frost covering the grass. My breath came out in white puffs. Inside, the Thanksgiving dinner still sat on the table. I'd left it there, hadn't been able to face cleaning up. Looking at it now in the morning light, it seemed surreal, like a photograph of someone else's life. I gathered the plates and scraped the cold food into the trash. The turkey went into containers for the refrigerator. Waste not, want not. I washed the dishes by hand, the hot water stinging my knuckles. I put everything away, wiped down the table, restored order. Then I took a shower, shaved, dressed in clean clothes. Jeans, flannel shirt, work boots. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same face I'd seen for 54 years, lines around the eyes, gray in the beard I'd grown after my wife died, hands that showed decades of hard labor. But something was different in the eyes. Something harder, colder, good. I drove to Paul's office at 10:30. The streets were quiet. Most businesses closed for the holiday weekend. Paul's firm occupied the second floor of a brick building downtown. I climbed the stairs and found the door unlocked. Paul was at his desk, Frank sitting across from him. Both looked up when I entered. Jack. Paul stood, shook my hand. Coffee? Thanks. He poured from a pot on the credenza. The office smelled like paper and old books. Legal tomes lined the shelves. Paul was 62, been practicing law in this town for 35 years. He'd handled my business contracts, my wife's estate, every legal matter I'd had. I trusted him. Right now that meant everything. So, Paul said, sitting back down, let's talk strategy. I took a seat next to Frank. I'm listening. Paul opened a file folder. Frank gave me copies of everything. I've reviewed it all. You have enough here to pursue criminal charges against both Miles and Nicole. Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, forgery. They'd face significant prison time. But that's not what you want. No. He nodded. Criminal prosecution is slow, could take years. They'd get lawyers, drag it out, and even if they're convicted, they'd be out eventually, young enough to rebuild. Exactly. So we go the civil route, fast, brutal, and permanent. He pulled out several documents. Here's what I'm proposing. For the next hour, Paul laid out the plan. It was brilliant, ruthless, exactly what I needed. We'd file a civil lawsuit for theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. We'd seek full restitution of the stolen money, plus punitive damages. We'd freeze their assets immediately with a temporary restraining order. We'd notify Miles's law firm of the allegations, triggering an ethics investigation. We'd contact the State Bar Association. We'd notify Burke Development and threaten to pursue charges of conspiracy and fraud against them as well if they didn't cooperate. The goal, Paul said, is to destroy their credibility completely. Miles loses his law license. Nicole loses any chance at a favorable divorce settlement. Burke distances himself to avoid prosecution. Chen gets thrown under the bus, and you get your money back, plus enough damages to make them financially insolvent for the rest of their lives. When do we file? Monday morning, first thing. But we need to move on the asset freeze today. I've already drafted the motion. Judge Morrison owes me a favor. He'll sign it this afternoon. Frank leaned forward. Once that freeze hits, they can't move money, can't sell property, can't do anything. And once your lawsuit is public, Miles's firm will suspend him pending investigation. He'll be toxic. What about Nicole? Paul smiled grimly. She's got more to lose than Miles. Her affair with Chen will come out in the proceedings. Any chance she had of a sympathetic divorce settlement evaporates. Plus, if Miles decides to cooperate with us to reduce his own liability, he could testify against her. She'll be completely isolated. I sipped my coffee. It was cold now, bitter. What do I need to do? Sign some documents, give a deposition, then let us handle the rest. Paul's expression softened. Jack, I'm sorry this is happening. Miles was a good kid once. Once? Are you sure you want to do this? Take it this far? He's still your son. I thought about yesterday, the look on Miles's face when he'd told me to apologize, the coldness in his eyes, the stranger sitting at my table. He stopped being my son when he started stealing from me, when he forged my signature, when he planned to have me declared incompetent and locked away. I set down the coffee cup. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine. Paul nodded slowly. All right then, let's get started. We spent the next 3 hours going through documents, signing paperwork, preparing affidavits. Frank had organized everything meticulously. The evidence was damning. Even if Miles tried to fight, he'd lose. The paper trail was too clear. At 3 o'clock, Paul got a call. He listened, said a few words, hung up. Judge Morrison signed the asset freeze. It's in effect as of now. Miles and Nicole's bank accounts are locked. Credit cards frozen. Any property transfers blocked. How long before they find out? They probably already know. Banks move fast on these things. My phone rang. Miles. I looked at the screen, let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Again, I ignored it. Third time, I answered. What? Dad, what the hell did you do? His voice was high, panicked. The bank just froze all our accounts. They said there's a court order. What did you do? What you did to me, only faster. This is insane. You can't do this. Already did. You'll get served with the lawsuit Monday morning. Dad, please, we can work this out. No, we can't. I hung up. The phone rang again. I turned it off. Paul was watching me. You okay? Fine. But I wasn't fine. Not really. Despite everything, despite the theft and the betrayal and the cold calculation of their plan, hearing Miles's voice cracking with panic had hurt something deep inside me. I pushed the feeling down, buried it. What happens now? Now? Paul closed his files. Now they scramble. They try to figure out what hit them. Monday, we file the lawsuit and it becomes public record. The press will pick it up. Miles's firm will see it. The Bar Association will launch an investigation. Burke Development will back away fast. Nicole will realize her affair is about to become common knowledge. And then? Then they lose. Everything. Their money, their reputation, their future. Everything they tried to take from you, they'll lose themselves. Frank spoke up. You're going to win this, Jack. Clean sweep. I stood, suddenly tired. Bone deep, exhausted. I should go. Get some rest, Paul said. This is going to be a long fight. I drove home as the sun was setting. The sky was purple and orange, clouds lit from below. Beautiful. The kind of sunset my wife would have made me stop to watch. I missed her. God, I missed her. She'd have known what to do. She'd have found some way to fix this, to reach Miles, to save him from himself. But she was gone. And I was alone. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck, engine running, heat blowing. The house looked dark and empty. The workshop windows reflected the sunset. I'd built this life, this home, this business. I'd worked every day for 30 years to create something stable, something I could pass to my son, and he'd tried to steal it. No, not tried, had stolen, was still stealing until I'd stopped him. I turned off the truck and went inside. The house was cold. I turned up the heat and made a sandwich I didn't eat. I turned on the television and watched without seeing. At midnight, I gave up and went to bed, but sleep didn't come. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the boy Miles used to be. The kid who'd helped me rebuild an engine when he was 12, who'd laughed at my jokes, who'd cried at his mother's funeral and held my hand during the service. Where had that boy gone? And could I have stopped this? Somewhere along the way, had I missed something? Some sign, some moment when I could have intervened, could have steered him back. I didn't know. Maybe. Probably. But it was too late now. The die was cast. The war had started, and I intended to win. January arrived cold and merciless. The lawsuit moved forward with grinding inevitability. Miles's lawyer filed motion after motion, trying to delay, trying to find some angle that would reduce the damages. Paul swatted them down one by one. Nicole's divorce from Miles was finalized in the second week of January. She got nothing. The asset freeze had protected what little remained, and her affair had destroyed any sympathy she might have gained. She moved back to Chicago, where she was from. I heard through the grapevine that she was working as a paralegal, a steep fall from the life she'd imagined. Miles moved into a studio apartment above the hardware store downtown. His BMW was repossessed. He took a job doing document review for a legal temp agency, mindless work that paid by the hour. The State Bar Association was still processing their investigation, but everyone knew the outcome. He'd be disbarred. It was just a matter of paperwork. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated. They'd lost everything, just as I'd planned. But I felt hollow, empty, like I'd won a battle, but couldn't remember why I'd been fighting. The business kept me busy. Morrison Trucking renewed their contract and referred 2 other companies. I hired another mechanic, expanded into a second bay. Money was good. The shop was thriving, but I'd come home to an empty house every night, eat dinner alone, watch television without seeing it, go to bed in the room I'd shared with my wife for 27 years, her side still empty, cold, untouched. Frank noticed. He came by one evening in mid-January, carrying a 6-pack and wearing a worried expression. "You look like shit," he said, handing me a beer. "Thanks." We sat in my living room. The television was off. The house was quiet except for the furnace running. "You win, you know," Frank said. "The lawsuit. Paul says Miles is going to settle. Full restitution plus $500,000 in damages. Everything you wanted." "I know. So why do you look like someone died?" I drank the beer. It was cold, bitter. Because someone did. My son. Miles is alive. The Miles I knew is gone. What's left is someone I don't recognize. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You ever wonder if maybe you push too hard?" "Every day. But you don't stop." "No." "Why not?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to say it out loud. Because stopping would mean admitting that maybe this wasn't about justice. Maybe it was about anger, about revenge, about punishing Miles for breaking my heart. "I can't stop now," I said finally. "Too far in." "Bullshit. You can stop any time. Drop the suit, take the restitution, let Miles try to rebuild." "And then what? We're a family again? Everything's forgiven?" "I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But at least you'd know you tried." I did try. For years I tried. I gave him everything, and he threw it back in my face. Frank finished his beer, set the empty bottle on the coffee table. "You're right, he did, and he deserves to be punished. But Jack, man, you're punishing yourself too. Look at you. You're miserable. This revenge thing, it's eating you alive." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're angry and bitter and alone. And yeah, Miles deserves what's happening to him. But what do you deserve? You deserve to be happy, to move on. To have a life that isn't consumed by this. I'll move on when it's finished." "And when is it finished? When Miles is completely destroyed? When he's living on the street? Where's the line, Jack? When do you say enough?" I stood up, walked to the window. Snow was falling again. Always falling. Endless winter. I don't know, I said quietly. I just know I'm not there yet. Frank left an hour later. I stood at the window long after his car disappeared down the road, watching snow accumulate on the driveway, on the workshop roof, on the trees that lined the property. My phone rang. Paul. Miles agreed to settle. Everything we asked for. He signs the papers Friday. Okay. You don't sound happy. I'm tired, Paul. Just tired. This is what you wanted. Complete victory. He pays back every penny he stole, plus damages. He's finished in this town, his career is over, his reputation destroyed. You won. Yeah, I won. We hung up. I sat back down on the couch in the dark and tried to feel something. Satisfaction, relief, joy, anything. But there was nothing. Just emptiness. Friday came. The signing was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Paul's office. I drove there through another snowstorm, the wipers barely keeping up with the accumulation. Miles was already there when I arrived. He sat in the conference room, staring at a stack of papers. His lawyer stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder. Paul sat across the table, briefcase open, everything organized and ready. I took my seat. Miles glanced up, met my eyes for a moment, then looked back down. Let's get this done, Paul said. He walked through the settlement agreement. Full restitution of all stolen funds, totaling $63,000. $500,000 in punitive damages, admission of guilt, agreement not to contest any future legal actions, perpetual restraining order preventing Miles from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property or business. With each paragraph Paul read, Miles seemed to shrink. His lawyer kept a professional expression, but I could see the resignation in her eyes. This was complete capitulation, total surrender. Any questions? Paul asked. Miles shook his head. Then sign here, and here, and here. Miles picked up the pen. His hand trembled. He signed the first page, then the second, then the third. With each signature, I felt something crack inside me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just loss. The papers were signed, notarized, filed, official. It was done. Miles stood slowly. His lawyer gathered her things, murmured something to him I couldn't hear. They walked toward the door. At the threshold, Miles stopped, turned back. I hope this was worth it, he said. His voice was flat. I hope destroying me made you happy. It didn't, I said before I could stop myself. He stared at me. Then why? Why? The question I'd been avoiding for months. The question Frank had asked, the question I'd asked myself in the dark hours of sleepless nights. Because you left me no choice. There's always a choice. You made yours when you started stealing. I made mine when I found out. So this is what justice looks like? Both of us destroyed? Both of us alone? You destroyed yourself, Miles. I just made sure you paid for it. He laughed. It was an ugly sound. Yeah, I paid. I'll be paying for the rest of my life. I hope that keeps you warm at night, Dad. I hope that fills the empty house. I hope that's enough. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Paul started organizing papers. That went well. Clean settlement. No loose ends. Yeah. You okay? Fine. But I wasn't fine. I felt sick. Dizzy, like the ground was tilting under my feet. I drove home through the storm. The roads were slick, dangerous. I took the corners too fast, felt the truck slide. Part of me hoped I'd lose control, spin out, crash, end this. But I didn't. I made it home. Pulled into the driveway. Sat in the truck with the engine running, heater blowing, watching snow cover the windshield. I'd won. Complete and total victory. Miles was broken, bankrupt, his life in ruins. Everything I'd wanted. So why did I feel like I'd lost? I went inside. The house was cold. I'd forgotten to turn up the heat before leaving. I stood in the living room looking at the photographs on the walls. Miles as a baby, Miles as a kid. Miles graduating high school, college, law school. My wife smiling in every picture, proud of her son. What would she think of what I'd done? Would she understand? Approve? Or would she be ashamed? I took down the photos one by one, put them in a box, closed the lid, carried the box to the basement and put it on a shelf, out of sight, out of sight, out of mind. If only it were that easy. February was worse than January. The settlement money came through. $663,000 transferred to my account in one lump sum. I paid off the mortgage, bought new equipment for the shop, took care of repairs I'd been putting off. The money sat in my account, growing by small amounts each month from interest, more money than I'd ever had at once. I couldn't touch it, couldn't spend it. It felt dirty somehow, tainted by what it represented. The town had moved on to new scandals. Miles became old news. People stopped asking me about the lawsuit. The sympathy in their eyes faded to awkwardness. They didn't know what to say to me anymore. Neither did I. I worked longer hours, stayed at the shop until 8, 9, 10 at night. Took on jobs I normally would have turned down. Anything to avoid going home to that empty house. Frank tried to get me to come over for dinner. Gail invited me to her church's potluck. Paul suggested we go fishing once the ice melted. I declined everything, made excuses. Work was busy. I was tired. Maybe next time. There was never going to be a next time. I knew it. They knew it. But we kept up the pretense. I saw Miles once in February. I was coming out of the grocery store carrying bags to my truck. He was walking down the sidewalk, head down against the wind. He wore a coat that was too thin for the weather, probably all he could afford now. We passed within 10 feet of each other. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me, just kept walking. I stood there, bags in hand, watching him disappear around the corner. Wanted to call out, say something, anything, but I didn't. The restraining order prevented him from approaching me, and I'd spent months establishing him as a threat. What would people think if they saw me chasing him down the street? So I loaded my groceries and drove home and ate dinner alone like always. March came with a thaw. The snow melted, leaving behind brown grass and muddy ground. The world looked tired, worn down by winter. I felt the same way. One evening I was closing up the shop when a car pulled into the lot. A woman got out, older, maybe 70, gray hair cut short. She walked with a cane. "Jack Brennan?" "That's me. I'm Margaret Sullivan, Miles's grandmother, his mother's mother. I'd met her at the wedding, briefly. She'd been frail even then, recovering from surgery. We'd exchanged pleasantries, nothing more. "Mrs. Sullivan, can I help you?" "I want to talk to you about my grandson." I almost said no. Almost got in my truck and drove away, but something in her face stopped me. Not anger or judgment, just sadness. "All right," I said. "Come inside." We sat in my office. I offered coffee. She declined. We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm not here to take sides," she said finally. "What Miles did was wrong, criminal. I'm not defending that." "Okay. But he's my grandson, the only family I have left." The words didn't register at first. "What?" "Not literally, not yet. But he will be. He's given up, stopped eating properly, stopped taking care of himself. He goes to work, comes home, sits in that tiny apartment staring at nothing. He's wasting away." I said nothing. "I know what he did to you. I know you have every right to hate him, but he's still a person. Still someone who made terrible mistakes, but doesn't deserve to die for them. He's facing consequences. There's a difference between consequences and destruction. You've destroyed him, Jack, completely, and I understand why. But where does it end? When does the punishment become enough? He stole from me, planned to have me committed, tried to take everything I'd built. I know. And he deserves to be punished. He is being punished. But does he deserve to lose everything? His career, his family, his future? Does he deserve to be left with nothing, not even the hope of redemption? I looked at her. This old woman, who'd lost her daughter to cancer, who was now watching her grandson destroy himself, who had every reason to be bitter, but instead was sitting in my office asking for mercy. What do you want from me? I want you to talk to him. Just once. Not to forgive him. Not to give him money or fix his life. Just to talk. To acknowledge that he's still human. Still capable of change. He had chances to change. He didn't take them. Then give him one more. Not for his sake. For yours. Mine? She leaned forward. Jack, my daughter loved you. Talked about you all the time. How hard-working you were. How dedicated. How much you loved your family. She'd be heartbroken to see what this has done to you. She'd be heartbroken to see what Miles did. Yes, she would. But she'd also be heartbroken to see you consumed by anger. She'd want you to find peace, to move forward, to live. I am living. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who's stopped, who's frozen in this moment of revenge, unable to move past it. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But I couldn't. Because she wasn't wrong. I hadn't lived in months. I'd existed, worked, functioned. But lived? No. I don't know if I can forgive him, I said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you to see him, to recognize that he's your son, that you're his father, and that whatever else happened, that bond still exists. Does it? After everything? That's for you to decide, but Jack, please, talk to him. Once. See if there's anything left worth saving. She stood slowly, leaning heavily on her cane. He's at the diner on 5th Street most mornings. Has coffee around 7 before work, if you want to find him. She left. I sat in my office long after she'd gone, staring at nothing. Talked to Miles, see if there's anything left worth saving. Was there? Or had I destroyed everything beyond repair? I didn't sleep that night, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Margaret Sullivan's words, about my wife, about Miles as a boy, about the man he'd become, about the man I'd become. At 6:30 the next morning I got up, showered, dressed, drove to the diner on 5th Street. Miles was there, sitting at the counter hunched over a cup of coffee. He looked thinner than he had in February. His clothes hung loose. His face was gaunt. I sat down 2 stools away, ordered coffee. Neither of us spoke. The waitress brought my cup. I added cream, stirred. The spoon clinked against the ceramic. Your grandmother came to see me, I said. Miles didn't look over. I know, she told me. She's worried about you. She worries too much. She thinks you're giving up. Maybe I am. We sat in silence. The diner filled with morning regulars. People ordered breakfast, chatted, lived their normal lives around us. Is she right? I asked. Are you giving up? Miles finally turned to look at me. His eyes were hollow, empty. What's the point of fighting? I lost everything. My career, my marriage, my family. What's left? Your life. Is it? This thing I'm doing. Is this a life? Working a shitty job, living in a shitty apartment, knowing everyone in town knows what I did? This isn't living, Dad. This is just existing. Then change it. He laughed. That same ugly sound from the settlement signing. Change it. Right. Because it's that easy. Just decide to be different and everything magically gets better. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was possible. For you, maybe. You're the hero of this story. The wronged father who fought back and won. But me? I'm the villain. And villains don't get redemption. You're not a villain. You're someone who made terrible mistakes. What's the difference? I thought about that. Took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, like always. Like everything in this God-forsaken town. The difference is that mistakes can be learned from. Villains are defined by their actions, but people who make mistakes can grow, change, Become something else. Pretty words, but words don't pay rent, don't fix reputations, don't give me back everything I lost. No, they don't. But they might give you a starting point. He shook his head. There's no starting point for me. Not here. Everyone knows. I can't rebuild in a place where everyone will always see me as the guy who stole from his father. Then leave. He looked at me, surprise on his face. What? Leave. Start over somewhere else. New city, new name if you want. Find a job, build a life, become someone different. I can't afford to leave. I can barely afford to eat. I pulled out my wallet, took out a check I'd written that morning, $5,000. I slid it across the counter. Take it. First month's rent and security deposit somewhere. Gas money to get there. Enough to survive until you find work. He stared at the check like it was a snake. Why? Because your grandmother asked me to see if there was anything left worth saving. Maybe there is. You're giving me money? After everything? I'm giving you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. His hand trembled as he reached for the check. I don't understand. You spent months destroying me. Why help me now? I stood up, dropped a 10 on the counter for my coffee. Because I'm tired. Tired of being angry. Tired of the emptiness. Tired of seeing my wife's disappointment every time I close my eyes. I know. But I still see her, still hear her voice. And she's telling me that revenge isn't the same as justice. That punishment isn't the same as healing. I walked toward the door. Miles called after me. Dad? I turned. Thank you. I nodded and left. Spring arrived slowly, reluctantly. The frozen ground thawed. Grass turned green. Trees budded. The world was waking up, and for the first time in months, so was I. Miles left town in mid-April. Margaret Sullivan told me he'd taken a job in Denver, something in construction. Manual labor. He'd sold what little he owned, packed his car, and driven away before dawn. He asked me to thank you, Margaret said, for the money, for the chance. I hope he makes something of it. So do I. She patted my hand. You did a good thing, Jack. Your wife would be proud. I wasn't so sure about that, but maybe it was a start. The shop was busy with spring repairs, people getting their vehicles ready for summer travel, fixing winter damage, doing maintenance they'd put off. I hired another mechanic, a kid fresh out of technical school, eager and hard-working. His name was Tyler. Reminded me a little of Miles at that age. Same enthusiasm, same quick hands, same desire to learn. I taught him what I knew, how to diagnose problems by listening to the engine, how to treat tools with respect, how to take pride in doing a job right. The same lessons I'd taught Miles 30 years ago, but I did it differently this time, more patient, more present. I made sure Tyler knew he was valued, that his work mattered, that he had a future here if he wanted it. Maybe I was trying to make up for something. Maybe I was just trying not to repeat past mistakes. Either way, it felt good. Like building instead of destroying. Frank noticed the change. We had dinner at his place in May, first time in months I'd accepted an invitation. You seem different, he said, pouring wine. Lighter. Maybe I am. Miles leaving helped? I think so. Gave me some distance. Let me breathe without seeing him around town. You know he's doing okay out there? Margaret keeps tabs, says he's working hard, staying clean. Good. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Frank said, You ever think about reaching out? Calling him? Sometimes. But you don't. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. Some damage can't be fixed. Maybe, but maybe it can be managed, lived with, worked around. I thought about that. Could Miles and I ever have a relationship again? Even a distant one? I didn't know. Wasn't sure I wanted to know. I'm not ready, I said finally. Fair enough. Just don't wait too long. Life's short. Life was short. I knew that. My wife had taught me that. Cancer had taught me that. This whole mess with Miles had taught me that. So I started living again. Small steps, accepting invitations, going to the diner for breakfast instead of eating alone at home, taking Sundays off to fish at the lake, calling old friends I'd neglected. One day in June, I drove to the cemetery, first time since the lawsuit started. I stood at my wife's grave, looking at her name on the stone. "I'm sorry," I said out loud, "for letting it consume me, for becoming someone you wouldn't recognize, for letting anger turn me into something ugly." The wind rustled through the trees. Birds sang. Miles is in Denver, working construction, starting over. I gave him money to leave. I don't know if that makes me weak or wise, but it felt right. A squirrel ran across the grass, stopped to look at me, then continued on. Life going on, indifferent to human pain. "I miss you. Every day. This would have been easier if you were here. You'd have known what to do. You always did. But she wasn't here. And I had to figure it out myself. I'm trying to move forward, to be better, to live the way you'd want me to live. It's hard, but I'm trying." I stayed a while longer, then drove home. The house didn't feel as empty as it used to. Still lonely, but not suffocating. Progress, I guess. July brought heat and humidity. The shop's air conditioning struggled to keep up. We worked in t-shirts, sweat-soaked by noon, taking breaks to drink water and cool off. Tyler was getting good, really good. He had instincts you couldn't teach, a feel for machines that came from somewhere deeper than training. "You ever think about going into business for yourself?" I asked him one afternoon. He looked surprised. "Me? No, I'm just starting out." So was I once. 28 years old, borrowed money from the bank, opened a one-bay shop, built it into this. I gestured at the 3 bays, the equipment, the organized chaos of a successful operation. "That's different. You're you. I'm just someone who worked hard and didn't quit. Same as anyone can be." He thought about that. "You really think I could do it? Run my own shop? In a few years, with more experience?" "Yeah, I do." A seed planted. Maybe it would grow, maybe not. But I'd given him the idea, shown him it was possible. More building, less destroying. August came, and with it, the anniversary of when I'd first discovered the theft. A year ago, Gail had come to me with questions about the accounts. A year ago, I'd started investigating. A year ago, everything had changed. I sat in my workshop, looking at the old files, the evidence I'd gathered. It all seemed distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Had it been worth it? Destroying Miles, getting the money back, winning completely? I still didn't know. The money sat in my account, mostly untouched. The business was successful. I had my property, my home, everything I'd fought to protect. But I'd lost my son, and I'd lost part of myself in the process. Maybe that was the price of justice. Maybe that was what revenge really cost. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Dad?" "Miles." My heart stuttered. "Miles!" "I know I'm not supposed to contact you, the restraining order, but I had to call, had to tell you something." "What is it?" "I got a job, a real job, with a construction firm here in Denver. They're putting me through project management training. It's not much, but it's something. A future, maybe." "That's good. I'm glad." I've been sober, going to meetings, dealing with my sh-t, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being someone I thought I should be. "Good." Silence. Then, "I know you probably don't want to hear this. Don't care. But I'm proud of myself. For the first time in years, I'm actually proud of something I'm doing." "You should be." More silence. I could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of a city larger than anything our small town could imagine. "I don't expect forgiveness," Miles said. "I don't expect a relationship. but I wanted you to know that the chance you gave me, the money, it mattered. I'm not wasting it. I hoped you wouldn't. I'm going to pay you back, all of it. The settlement, the damages, everything. It'll take years, but I'm going to do it. Miles, no, let me do this. Let me prove that I can be better than I was, that I can make this right, even if it takes the rest of my life. I thought about saying no, telling him the money didn't matter, but maybe it did matter. Maybe him paying it back was part of his healing, his redemption. All right, I said. Pay me back if that's what you need to do. Thank you. We hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in over a year. Hope. Maybe not for a relationship. Maybe not for reconciliation. But hope that Miles would be okay. That he'd find his way. That the boy I'd raised wasn't completely gone, just lost, and now maybe finding his way back. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe never. But it was something. Fall came early that year. September brought cool nights and shorter days. The leaves began their slow turn to red and gold. The air smelled like wood smoke and distant rain. I turned 55 in October. No party, no celebration. Just another day, marked only by the steady accumulation of years. Frank and Gail took me to dinner. We ate steaks, drank beer, told old stories. It was nice, comfortable, normal. I'd forgotten what that felt like. The shop was busier than ever. Tyler had proven himself invaluable, taking on more responsibility, training the newer mechanics. I'd given him a raise and started talking about making him shop foreman. You don't have to do that, he'd said. I want to. You've earned it. He'd smiled, the kind of smile that came from genuine pride. I recognized it because I'd once had it myself, back when I was young and building something and believing I could make it on merit alone. November arrived with frost and bare trees. Thanksgiving approached, and I dreaded it. Last year, Thanksgiving had been the beginning. The dinner where everything exploded. The moment when I'd realized I couldn't ignore the betrayal any longer. I thought about spending the day at Frank's, accepting his invitation, but I needed to face it, needed to prove to myself that I could sit in my house, at my table, and not drown in the memories. Thanksgiving morning, I cooked. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, the whole traditional meal. Just like last year. Just like I'd done for decades with my wife, and then alone after she died, and then last year with Miles and Nicole. But this year, I wasn't eating alone. I'd invited Tyler and his girlfriend, Frank and his wife, Gail and her husband, Paul and his partner, Margaret Sullivan, my mechanics and their families. 14 people total. The house was full of voices and laughter and life. We ate, we talked, we shared stories. Tyler told terrible jokes that made everyone groan. Frank argued politics with Gail's husband. Margaret held court at one end of the table, telling stories about her daughter, my wife, that made me laugh and cry at the same time. It was chaotic, messy, imperfect. It was wonderful. After dinner, while people were having coffee and pie, Paul pulled me aside. Got some news. Thought you'd want to know. What's that? Miles's payment started. First installment on the settlement. $2,000. He didn't have to start paying yet. I know. But he wanted to. Said he wanted to show he was serious about making it right. $2,000. A drop in the bucket compared to what he owed. But it was something. A gesture. An attempt. How is he doing? Really? Paul shrugged. From what I hear, better, got promoted at work, moved into a better apartment, staying clean, building a life. Good. You ever think about reaching out? Talking to him? Same question Frank had asked months ago. Same question I'd been asking myself. Sometimes, but I don't know what I'd say. Maybe you don't have to say anything profound. Maybe just hello would be enough. Maybe. Or maybe not. Some things once broken couldn't be glued back together. You could acknowledge the pieces, recognize what they used to form, but you couldn't make them whole again. December was cold but dry. No major snowstorms, just steady, cold, and clear skies. The town decorated for Christmas. Lights went up on Main Street. The square fountain was turned into a winter display. I put up a tree in my living room, decorated it with the ornaments my wife had collected over the years. Each one had a story. The glass ball from our first Christmas together, the wooden angel Miles had made in second grade, the silly felt snowman my wife had bought at a craft fair and loved despite its lopsided face. I didn't put presents under the tree. There was no one to give them to. But the tree itself was enough. A symbol of continuity, of life going on. Christmas Eve, I went to the cemetery again, stood at my wife's grave in the cold twilight. "It's been a year," I said, "since everything happened, since I blew up our family and won and lost everything at the same time." The cemetery was empty except for me. Most people were home, preparing for Christmas, being with family. Miles is in Denver. He's doing better, paying me back, trying to make amends. I don't know if we'll ever be okay, him and me. But he's surviving. That's something. A light snow began to fall. Tiny flakes that caught in my beard, melted on my cheeks. I'm surviving too, building a life. Trying to be the man you married instead of the angry, bitter thing I became. It's hard, but I'm trying. I stayed until the light faded completely, until the snow accumulated on the headstone, until my fingers went numb from the cold. Then I went home, made dinner, watched a movie, went to bed, alone, but not lonely, not anymore. The new year arrived quiet and unremarkable. January was cold but manageable. The shop stayed busy. Life continued its forward march. Miles called twice in January. Short calls, updates on his life. He'd been promoted again, was taking classes at community college, thinking about getting a degree in civil engineering, was seeing someone, a woman named Rachel, who worked as a teacher. I listened, said encouraging things, kept the conversations brief. We weren't father and son anymore. We were something else. Acquaintances, maybe. Two people with a shared history trying to find a way to exist in proximity without destroying each other. It would have to be enough. February brought a surprise. A letter arrived, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. Denver postmark. I opened it carefully. Inside was a check. $5,000. A note in Miles's handwriting. "Dad, this month's payment plus extra. Got a bonus at work. Wanted to put it toward what I owe. Hope you're doing well. M." I stared at the check. $5,000. More than required. More than expected. I deposited it. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I wrote back. "Miles, received payment. Thank you. Proud of your progress. Keep it up. Dad." Short. Impersonal, but honest. I mailed it and tried not to think about what it meant. That I was proud of him. That despite everything, I still cared about his success. That maybe, somewhere deep down, there was still a father who loved his son. March brought the first hints of spring. Warmer days, mud season, the eternal optimism of crocuses pushing through frozen ground. I started going to the diner on 5th Street for breakfast again. Not looking for Miles. He was gone, building his life elsewhere. But because I'd let that place become a symbol of our final conversation, and I needed to reclaim it. Make it mine again. One morning, Margaret Sullivan came in. She sat beside me at the counter. "Miles told me you wrote to him, said it meant a lot." It was just a note. It was acknowledgement, recognition that he exists, that his efforts matter. "That's not nothing, Jack." "I suppose not." She ordered coffee, added cream, and too much sugar. "You're still angry with him." "Yes, but less than before." I thought about that. Was I less angry? The rage that had driven me for months was gone, but anger? Yes. Anger was still there, buried deeper, less consuming, but present. Maybe. I don't know. Some days I'm fine. Some days I think about what he did and I want to. I stopped. Want to what? Want to hurt him again. Want to make him pay more than he already has. Want him to feel what I felt. She nodded. That's normal. Betrayal doesn't heal overnight. Does it heal at all? That depends on you, on whether you choose to let it heal or keep picking at the wound. He stole from me, planned to have me committed, nearly destroyed everything I'd built. I know. And you destroyed him right back, made him lose everything. So now you're even. The question is, what happens next? I don't know. Then maybe it's time to figure that out, because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's only hurting you now, Jack. Miles is moving forward. Are you? I didn't have an answer. April came with rain and rebirth. The world turned green. Everything grew, stretched, reached for the sun. Tyler asked me about buying into the business. Not right away, he said quickly. But in a few years, maybe, if you'd consider it. A partnership. A partnership. Yeah, I love this work, love this place, but I also want to build something, have ownership, a stake in the future. I looked at him. Young, eager, honest. Everything Miles should have been and wasn't. Let's talk about it, I said. Draw up a plan. We'll see if it makes sense. His face lit up. Really? You'd consider it? I'm not getting any younger. Eventually, I'll need someone to take over. Might as well be someone who cares about the business as much as I do. We shook hands. A promise. Maybe that was better. Maybe trust had to be earned, proven, maintained. And maybe family was less about biology and more about who you chose to stand beside. May brought warmth and long days. I started taking evenings off, fishing at the lake, working in the garden my wife had planted years ago that I'd let go wild, slowly taming it, bringing order back, making something grow. Frank commented on it. You're different, lighter, like a weight's been lifted. Maybe it has. Miles? Partly, but also me, choosing to let go instead of holding on. That's growth, my friend. Was it? I didn't know. But it felt like something, like movement in the right direction. June arrived with heat and humidity, summer in full force. The shop's air conditioning finally gave up completely. We worked with fans and open bay doors and lots of water. Tyler had drawn up a business plan. It was good, thorough, showed real understanding of the shop's operations and potential for growth. We met with Paul to discuss the legal aspects of a partnership. You're serious about this? Paul asked me. I am. Tyler's not family. No, he's not. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even better. Paul nodded slowly. All right then, let's make it happen. We drew up papers, set a timeline. 5 years from now, Tyler would buy a 40% stake. In 10 years, if things worked out, he'd have the option to buy me out completely. It felt right. July brought the kind of heat that made thinking difficult. We mostly worked early mornings and late evenings, avoiding the worst of the day. Miles called mid-month. I'm getting married, he said. No preamble, no explanation. Married. Yeah, to Rachel, the woman I've been seeing. We're doing it in August, small ceremony here in Denver. Congratulations. Silence. Then, I'd like you to be there, if you're willing. My breath caught. Miles, I know it's a lot to ask, after everything, but you're my father, and I'd like you there. I thought about it, really thought about it. Could I go to Denver, watch Miles marry someone new, stand there as his father after all that had happened? Could I refuse? Say no to my only child's wedding, this chance at happiness he was building from the wreckage? Let me think about it. Okay, that's fair. I'll send you the details. If you decide to come, great. If not, I understand. We hung up. I sat in my workshop, the evening cooling around me, and tried to figure out what I wanted. Not what I should do, not what looked right, what I actually wanted. Did I want to see Miles happy? Yes. Did I want to participate in his new life? I didn't know. Could I stand there, in a tux or a suit, and smile and shake hands and pretend everything was fine? Probably not. But could I stay home, knowing I'd been invited, knowing I'd chosen absence over presence? Could I live with that choice? Also probably not. I was stuck, paralyzed between competing impossibilities. The invitation arrived 3 days later. Simple, elegant. Miles Brennan and Rachel Torres request your presence at their wedding. August 15th, 2 o'clock. Small venue in Denver. Reception to follow. A note was paperclipped to the invitation. Miles's handwriting again. Dad, I know this is asking a lot. I know I don't deserve your presence. But I'm asking anyway. I'm building a life here. A good life. Rachel knows everything. About the theft, the lawsuit, all of it. She knows who I was and who I'm trying to become. I'd like you to meet her, to see what I'm building. No pressure. But the invitation is real. M. I put the invitation on my refrigerator, looked at it every morning while I drank my coffee. Let it sit there, an unanswered question. Frank noticed it when he came over for dinner. You going? I don't know. What's stopping you? Pride, maybe. Anger. Fear that if I go, if I participate, it means I'm okay with what happened. That I've forgiven him. And you haven't? No, I don't think I have. Does going to a wedding require forgiveness? I thought about that. Maybe not. But it feels like participation, like endorsement. Or maybe it's just being there for your son, acknowledging that despite the past, he's still your son and he's trying. Is that enough? That's for you to decide.